Hey folks, John here, Old Hickory Forge, welcome back. If it's your first time here, welcome. So, what's going on today? I'm out here in the workshop, and I got something pretty cool to share with you. So if you haven't heard, Harbor Freight has come out with a new anvil. Harbor Freight has been infamous for many, many years for their poor quality cast iron anvils. They were kind of the most commonly available beginner anvil out there, but they were soft, they were brittle, they were poorly designed, they really just weren't good. And from what I understand, in recent years, Harbor Freight has been kind of trying to step their game up and get away from their reputation of poor quality tooling. So they've come out with a new anvil. It's 65 pounds, and it's cast steel. So my local Harbor Freight finally got one in stock. I grabbed it up, and we're going to run it through some rigmarole and see what it has to say for itself. So if you want to check it out, stick around. Quick look at the anvil before we really get started. There's really not a whole lot of information on the Harbor Freight website, just that it's cast steel, so it doesn't tell you what alloy, doesn't tell you what Rockwell hardness. We'll take some Rockwell files to it and kind of see what we're working with. Then we'll strip the paint, get a closer look at the quality of the casting. The price on this guy is $139.99 on the website. When I bought this, it was $149 and some change out the door. So right at $230 a pound. Let's take a closer look and see what you get for your money. The Harbor Freight website claims 80% rebound, so I got a 1-inch hardened steel ball bearing right here, and let's just see what we're working with. If you're unfamiliar with rebound in the ball bearing test, basically it's just a ballpark measurement of how hard the face of the anvil is. So you drop your ball bearing from 10 inches and it bounces back up 8, you have 80% rebound. And that's bouncing, basically all the way right back up to my hand, so that's actually quite good. Now we'll take the Rockwell testing files to it. These are something bladesmiths use to check the Rockwell hardness on knives after heat treating. Basically the principle is if this is a 65 Rockwell hardness file. If the anvil is harder than 65, it will skate the file. If it's softer than 65, the file will be able to cut it. So, 65 is cutting. Let's grab the 60. The 60 isn't really cutting it, but it is scratching it. Let's grab the 55. And the 55 is actually skating quite nicely, so this is somewhere between 55 and 60, probably 56 to 58 range. Now we're going to check the hardness over here on the horn right quick. If you remember on the Videography anvil that I reviewed recently, which is quite similar to this one, I was very happy with the hardness of the workface, but the horn was dead soft. I'm thinking we're probably going to have a similar situation here, so I got the 40 Rockwell file, I'm aiming low. And that cuts the steel of the horn quite easily, so the horn is dead soft. Now, it's worth mentioning that Harbor Freight isn't exactly famous for their quality control, so you may end up getting one harder than this, you may end up getting one softer than this, you may end up getting one with significant casting flaws. This one does have a pretty noticeable one right here on this corner, and there's no way to know how bad it actually is until we strip the paint off and take a closer look at the quality of the casting. So if you do decide to purchase one of these, I would probably open the box in the parking lot and look at it before you take it home. That way, if you need to swap it out, you can go ahead and do it while you're there. That is kind of an advantage of purchasing from a physical store, is if you're unhappy with the anvil, you can just take it back and get another one. But anyway, let's keep moving. Now I know what some of you may be thinking. John, that looks just like the Videography anvil. And you're not wrong, they're very similar patterns. It wouldn't surprise me to find out that they're actually being made in the same factory over in China. Biggest difference is the placement of the hardy hole. It's up by the horn on the Doyle, which I actually prefer, only because that's what I'm used to. The brittle hole is up on the face instead of set down on the horn like on the Vivo, which actually does make it much, much more useful. There are no mounting holes on the feet of the Doyle, which there are on the Vivo, which does kind of suck, but is what it is. Some other minor differences: the heel on the Doyle does appear to be a little bit more stout and meaty, as well as the step in between the horn and the face is a little bit more pronounced, which is kind of a useful feature. But let's get the paint stripped off and see what we're dealing with. So the coat of paint on this was quite thick. I did 2 rounds of the stripper, and there's still some down there at the bottom I wasn't able to get off. It should come off with the wire brush, which is going to be the next step. As you can see, there's some filler material on this side of the anvil. as well as a couple of spots on this side of the anvil. That's to be expected with cheaper anvils. You know, you're not going to get perfection for $2.30 a pound, and you don't really know how bad those voids are until you scrape that filler material out. So next thing we're going to do, take a wire brush to this guy and see what we're dealing with. So after cleaning up the anvil, the only significant casting defects that I found were right here and right here. Hopefully once we've rounded these edges over a little bit, they shouldn't cause us any problems. So the quality of the casting overall, while not excellent, I do think it is solid. Next step before we can use this guy is we got to do what's called dressing the anvil. And this is kind of a matter of personal preference. The way I like to do it is the front 4 inches or so I'm going to dress to about a 3/8 radius so they're nice and soft. I like to leave the back end a little bit sharper, although we don't want a hard 90. You know, that's if you accidentally mishit, there's a good chance that could break and send a chip into your leg, which actually has happened to me before, and it does kind of suck. So the sharp corners on the Hardy and the Pritchell, we're going to round those over as well as this corner up here on the bench. Nothing to it, really. So we weren't quite able to get down past that casting flaw. Maybe I could if I kept rounding this edge over, but this is where I like it, so I'm just going to be careful working right there. And let's put this guy to work. To mount the anvil, I just drilled some holes in some angle iron and ran some lag screws into my stump. Not the most permanent or secure method, but it'll work for what we need it for. So, quick note, obviously this anvil is way too low for me. Proper anvil height is if you stand and let your fist hang relaxed by your side. That's about where you want the face, but it'll be okay for what we're doing. I figure we'll knock out a couple of basic projects. We'll start with a leaf, so I got a bar a 1/2 inch square. We're forging a stout taper on one side. Now that I've got the taper established, we'll go ahead and use the far side of the anvil to isolate the material for the leaf. And to isolate the material for the stem, you do another set down on the near side. I'm going to use that bad spot on the anvil, see if it holds up. Now we'll start flattening out the leaf. Maybe squirrel on the end. So, kind of a crappy leaf, you know, but you get the idea. I kind of just wanted to go through the motions and get a feel for the anvil. Let's make a railroad spike knife now. We'll do the twist first. And now we'll isolate the blade material using the guillotine tool. We want to start by widening out the blade material, so I'm just going to go at it with my cross peen. So this here is what I would consider a spike knife blank. I did cheat and kind of form up the tip on the grinder a little bit just to save us some trouble forging out the blade. But all we'll really try to do is just widen and thin it out into about a 1/4 inch thick bar stock or so. And now we'll start shaping the blade. So first thing, we're going to use the horn and kind of move the material for the blade over to get the spine in line with the handle. Like that. And now we'll start shaping out the blade. Then we'll lay in some bevels. At the start of the video, I mentioned this little step right here and how it's useful. Kind of what I was talking about, whenever you're doing something like drawing down a knife bevel really thin, it's beneficial to kind of be able to use a half-faced hammer blow off of that front edge. So it definitely comes in handy. So, just a real quick spike knife. Obviously, it would still need to be profiled and ground and finished out and all that. But, I just kind of wanted to bang out a couple of simple beginner projects. The kind of stuff you're going to be doing if you're in the market for an entry-level anvil like this. But let's wipe it off and see how it looks. So, here's a good look at the face of the anvil after doing all that work. What all this is just kind of blemishes on the surface finish. There's no dents or dings or cracks or anything anywhere. The face is still good and flat. Except for one spot right here where I did accidentally kind of glance the face of my hammer off at the edge. And that's kind of why I round these corners up here at the front over so heavily, is because I use them a lot. And that way if I accidentally glance the face of my hammer off, I'm not worried about chipping a sharp edge. Over here, that bad spot we talked about earlier, and we did a little bit of work on, it seems to be holding up just fine. It's no worse than it was before, but if I were to continue using this anvil, that would be something I would be careful about. But all in all, I'd say it held up well. So, after putting this little guy through its paces, I've gone through and gathered my thoughts, and I got some pros and cons listed in my high-speed little notebook here. I'll give you the cons first. First thing, there's no mounting holes. That is something I really liked about the Vevor anvil whenever I reviewed that. It was super easy to bolt down and get straight to work. But realistically, that's going to be a problem you're going to have with just about any anvil you buy. There's very few being produced today that come with mounting holes already there. And the only antique brand that I know of that had mounting lugs, cast into the base are Fisher anvils. So there's that. Con number 2, spotty quality control. As we saw with mine, there were a couple of flaws in the casting. They weren't structural. They haven't caused me any problems yet, but who knows how they would hold up going forward. But realistically, for $2.30 a pound, you're not going to get perfection. This is very much an entry-level anvil. It's not top shelf. It's not professional grade. So keep your expectations reasonable. And also, like I said before, if you purchase one of these, it might be prudent to go ahead and open the box and look at it in the parking lot and make sure there's nothing glaringly wrong with it before you take it home. That way, if you need to swap it out, you're already there. So, now I'll give you the good news. First and foremost, it's affordable, right at $2.30 a pound. If you find it on sale, or maybe if you look back in the open box item area, you might be able to get an even better deal on it or something, but if you want top shelf like Holland or Pettinghouse, you're looking at spending around $7 a pound. And if you want to go best of the best and get an Ernst Reffinghaus, you're looking at spending about $10 a pound. So, buying new can be quite an investment if you want professional grade. But if you're, a weekend warrior or something like that, or you're looking to get started and see how you like the hobby, this is something you're not going to have to drop a whole bunch of money on. Number 2, it's available. This is something you can physically go to a store and buy. You don't have to buy it online and worry about it getting lost in shipping. You're not going to spend weeks hunting down Craigslist and Facebook Marketplace trying to go after an antique anvil. You can just go to a store and get it. So there's something to be said about that. Also, there's something to be said about if you don't like it, you can take it back. So there's that. It's got a functional pritchel hole. That's the biggest gripe with the Vevor anvils, is the pritchel hole is in kind of a bad spot and it's not very useful. So this is a pretty good step up from that. Another thing, it's portable. It's not too big. It's the design, it's reminiscent of Italian-style pig anvils, in which there's not a whole lot of material in the base. It's all kind of preserved for the upper half of the anvil. So you get a lot bigger of a workspace. You get a similar work surface to if you had a much larger, much heavier anvil without having a much larger, much heavier anvil. Also, if you don't have a dedicated shop, you got to pull everything out every time you want to forge and then put it all back when you're done or something like that. This is something that's not going to be too difficult to move around. All in all, is it something I would recommend? Well, if you're in the market for an entry-level anvil, yes. I don't think you're going to find anything better for $2.30 a pound unless you get really lucky with an antique anvil. Now, if you've already bought the Vevor anvil, which is pretty comparable in terms of price and quality and all that, I don't think it's worth going and buying another one of these just to get the better pritchel hole. So if you've already got the Vevor, just keep rocking with what you got and keep saving up for your next big tool purchase or your next bigger, better anvil. Keep your expectations reasonable. If you do buy one of these, like I said, you're not going to get top shelf for $2.30 a pound. But if you don't have an anvil, you want an anvil, there you go. Before I go, I just wanted to take a minute and say that I actually am really happy to keep seeing more and more entry-level, affordable, decent quality anvils showing up on the market. You know, it used to be your only options were, you know, cast iron, railroad track, high-end anvils, or, you know, trying to get lucky with an antique. And with what a lot of people were asking for antiques, it often made more sense to buy new. But the laws of supply and demand are doing their thing. Anvils are more abundant, available, and affordable now than they ever have been. And if you ask me, that's a good thing. The more people, the lower the barriers of entry are, and the more people pick up the craft of blacksmithing, the better, if you ask me. But that's all I got for you. If you like what you saw, like, share, subscribe, all that jazz. Always more cool stuff coming. Links down in the description box below to my social media if you want to follow me. Instagram is where I'm the most active. Links to the Etsy store if you'd like to purchase any of my work. And Patreon if you'd like to support the channel. But like I said, that's all I got for you. Y'all take care.